Welcome again to our next session, To Market to Market. I hope you've been enjoying the day so far. It's with great pleasure that I can introduce you to our following panellists. Morgan Jaffit, Director of Defiant Development. Nicole Stark, Director at Disparity Games. Sanatana Mishra, Designer at Witchbeam Games. And George Fidler, General Manager at KIXEYE Australia. And our lovely Moderator, Truna, Brisbane IDGA.
briGDA.
briGDA.
Call us briGDA.
briGDA. Okay, I'll say it 3 times. I hand it over.
Right, I better try.
Better
So
go.
you've kind of taken the wind out of my sails a wee bit there, because I was going to introduce everybody.
You do it better than me.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So I don't need the mic. Thank you. We are here as, game makers and designers to talk about markets. And my first sort of set of questions actually invites our beautiful panelists to actually introduce themselves. But before I give them that chance, and given that, Kieran's already done the name thing, I would like to tell you how lucky you are to have these 4 fabulous representatives of Brisbane's, vibrant and, can I call it loving? We're not as big as Melbourne, but we've got a whole load more community love here. And so I think we start off with a great big cheer for them all coming here. Ray, that's where I like to begin. All right, so first up we have our adored Nicole from Disparity Games, and somebody should be... Oh, do you think I should tell them about what's behind us?
Yes.
Very quickly, because we know that some of you are kind of quite new to this space and this design space, just as a little backup, I've thrown up Jeff Brand et al.'s Digital Australia 2012 report for you. So that would have happened over the course of 2010 and 11. And I think it's worth putting back as a backup later, because it's probably got some really surprising statistics for some of you who work in other media other than games. I mean, the pervasiveness of games in contemporary society is the most extraordinary thing. The fact that those 8% of you who don't play games, is anybody here somebody who doesn't play games? Well, you're pretty damn unusual these days, mate. Sorry. And quite often that were I to quiz you, I would discover that you actually do play something like Scrabble or chess, or something like that. And in fact, you are not one of the 8% who doesn't play games. Don't know. But I'll let Nicole introduce herself. Can we have Disparity Games up? Take it away, darling.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole Stark. I'm an independent games developer from Noosa. We think we're the only games developer on the Sunshine Coast. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm quiet. If you can't hear me, let me know. We're a family-based outfit. My husband and I work together from home, and we haven't killed each other yet. And one of our daughters works for us 2 days a week, and the other 3 help out in odd little ways here and there. At the moment, we're working on Ninja Pizza Girl.
Want the video?
Here it is, yeah.
Yep.
Which is a game about growing up and self-esteem and bullying. And parkour. That's cool.
Beat that, George.
Yeah, there's a bit more killing in our games. My name's George Fidler, and I guess I'm the elder statesman of the group here. I started in the industry back in 1989, I think, and for pretty much all of that time I've tended to work, start businesses around the backing of American publishers. So my first job in the industry was for a company called Electronic Arts, one of the big games publishers out of San Francisco, and 10 years later I left there and started a new development studio in Brisbane called the Creative Assembly, and that was acquired by Sega. And then when I left there, I joined a small little band of brothers here in Brisbane called Three Blokes, and we were quickly acquired by an American publisher called RockU. That unfortunately didn't go as planned, and within a couple of months we were reacquired by a company called KIXEYE, and KIXEYE is one of the world's leading free-to-play games publishers, once again based out of San Francisco, and that's where we are now. So we started 2 years ago with 8 people, and we're currently I think around 50 people here in Fortitude Valley. KIXEYE we're a wholly owned subsidiary of KIXEYE, the American publisher, and they've pumped in tens of millions of dollars into us and into the Brisbane market, and we're on the verge of publishing something fairly new and innovative. The product's called VEGA Conflict, and the significance of this is that the game's entirely built on servers. It's server authoritative. And what that means is that because the games are running on servers, it's much harder for players to hack. And it also means that on the client end, we're free to allow people to play on the device of their choice. So you can play on a PC, or you can play on an iPhone or an Android tablet. You name the device, and we can support it. So it's the same game. So you can play at work on your PC, and then fire it up on your iPhone on the way home and on your tablet when you hit your couch. And that's a huge point of innovation. It's something that not many other game developers in the world have managed to achieve. We've been lucky enough to do it for KIXEYE, and on the back of that innovation, KIXEYE is aggressively growing us here in Brisbane. So despite all the bad press we're hearing about the games industry, right now we're one of the good news stories, which is good for me and my mortgage.
You've always been a good news story. Is that Q video?
Q video.
Q video. Okay, Nat, your turn, darling.
Thank you. I'm Sanatana Mishra, and I'm a designer and game developer based here in Brisbane as well. I actually used to work with George. He hired me about almost 8 years ago now to work at the Creative Assembly when that was still around. And recently, in the last 2 years, I've branched out on my own into a small independent team of 3 people, kind of similar to what Nicole is doing, with very small team, small focus on, I guess, niche downloadable games. Right now my team is called Witchbeam, and we're working on our first game called Assault Android Cactus, and never name any project anything like that. It's the first and best piece of advice I can give you. My role is typically non-technical. It's more about the cohesion of the game experience, narrative, game mechanics, and elements like that within the game. And then I also handle a lot of our, I guess, extraneous stuff that's not about the game itself, marketing, going to different events, flying around the world and showcasing the game to publishers and potential partners. So I have some experience in those areas that I'll be talking about later. But I have somebody else who does the technical stuff for me, thankfully. And yeah, I guess I'll just show the trailer for what I'm working on. The first.
So cool. And here at the end, Morgan, your turn.
So my name's Morgan Jaffit. I run a small studio in the Valley with my business partner Dan Trevel called Defiant Development. We're about 15 people. We come from a background like pretty much everybody here, rooted in the kind of old US-owned studio system. We set up our own studio just over 4 years ago, and since that time we've primarily been focused in the mobile space, which has been a great opportunity for us. We've had some good successes there. Ski Safari in particular has done very well for us, and we're now working on a game for PC platforms and PlayStation 4 and hopefully Xbox One called Hand of Fate, which is kind of a combination of a board game and a video game in a variety of ways that's kind of tricky to explain. In a similar kind of piece of advice, I would say that weird niche games that target tiny audiences and cross sections of multiple branches of tiny audiences and are hard to explain may not be the best place to start. But it's actually worked out pretty well for us in this case. We have one very, very mass market title, which is Ski Safari, which has an audience of some outrageous amount. Well over 50 million people have played Ski Safari at this point in time. Huge number of those in China, but almost all of them for free. Whereas on the other hand, this is a game that isn't mass market and is aimed at a much smaller, specific group of people, but we know our consumer very, very well, and we're able to, speak to them one-on-one, which has worked out very well. Happy to show the first bit of the trailer here. Our art director would whack me for this trailer because it's all footage that's about 6 months old from our Kickstarter campaign at the moment. But the game is about you playing with an animated deck of cards against a malevolent dealer who sits on the other side of the table and, makes comments and generally causes trouble for you. And then the cards fly into the world and become 3D objects which you can use to collect gear and defeat enemies and all sorts. So that's Hand of Fate. And yeah, those are some of the things we're doing at the moment.
Fantastic. So there's been quite a few terms that I've noticed everybody using that may not make sense to people here, and I think it's time to ask the big question on my list, which says, for those in the audience who aren't so familiar with the way that games are developed and brought to market. You know, can you kind of explain what it means? We've got an indie dev here, we've got someone with a publisher, we've got someone with funding but not nearly a publisher, soon interest from Sony? Yeah.
No, we're still going to be self-publishing everything, but we are working with Sony, you know, Nintendo and other people.
And we've got a Kickstarter. So all of those are really, really important. And perhaps you'd like to kind of explain to the audience what that actually means. You first.
I'll take independent developer, or otherwise known as an indie. Basically, just developers who self-publish. Really, pretty much. Yeah. We don't have anyone telling us what to do or when to do it, or footing any of our bills, unfortunately.
So the question there that sort of really springs to mind is, why are you so crazy?
I don't know. Because we can do what we want when we want to do it, and there's a lot of sleepless nights involved, wondering if we've done the right thing, but hopefully will all one day be worth it.
Our studio is also independent, and a lot of it is to do with having creative control over your own IP and property. So there's nobody who can tell us to make the breast larger on our female character, which is something I've actually heard a conversation about at a major game studio at one point in my life. So
At least
silly
5
things.
times.
Yeah. So when you have control over your property, you can make sure that you treat it with the respect that it deserves, and you can really control how you market it, how you bring it to people's attention, and there's a lot of power there. Even though you lose out on having a smaller voice, you have a more concise message.
Yeah, we're independent, pretty much because we set up in the wake of the GFC and nobody had any money, so we had to kick ourselves off. As Truna pointed out, we had a successful Kickstarter at the end of last year and raised $50,000 for Hand of Fate, which was fantastic. And again, you know, the real benefit of any sort of crowdfunding is that it connects you directly with your audience, and you've then got a base of people that you're speaking to about what you're producing and giving you feedback. Prior to that, we've been fortunate enough to be one of the Screen Australia enterprise companies, and we've also received small amounts of funding in the past around projects that we've done. We've had the assistance of Screen Queensland to travel internationally and promote our games. So there's been a really strong atmosphere, I guess, of broader support while we've been, you know, growing the studio and building our foundations. But almost all of our revenues come from either doing work for clients or the sales of our own products. That started out as, it started out as 75% of the work we did was work for clients, and 25% was our own stuff funded by client work, and it's now probably turned around to 10% of what we do as client work, and the rest is funded by our own revenues, and that's over the course of about 4 years. So.
And George?
Well, I'm clearly the odd man out. You know, obviously, we're wholly owned by an American company. I guess the difference for us is kind of simple. We don't own our intellectual property, but we are all shareholders in the company. So we get to share the profits, and we get to enjoy the capital gain if the company grows sufficiently and sells out or lists on the stock exchange. So there's still a high degree of ownership, but there is no question that you don't get $20-30 million invested in you without a bucket load of questions. So the downside is, yep, I definitely have to manage the relationship with the Americans. That's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it does take up a lot of my time, but on the other hand, they're also in the largest consumer market in the world, and so they have all of the publishing facilities over there, which for a free-to-play game means user acquisition. So we spend tens of millions of dollars acquiring users by placing ads on all of the popular social networks and the like. And it also means that, you know, we can share in infrastructure costs like analytics, because obviously in a you know, game like ours, a free-to-play massive multiplayer game where you have tens of thousands of people playing it every hour, it's crucially important that you have systems in place that allow you to tell exactly how your game's performing in every conceivable way. And so we have teams of data scientists and analysts that support us in that process. So they're facilities that we would find it very difficult to do as an independent, simply because the massive online space you know, has some pretty significant barriers to entry. So I'd like to think that we get the best of both worlds. We get the benefits of obviously capital and infrastructure, but we also get the benefit of sharing in the success if the company takes off.
Fantastic. Was there ever a moment after the Three Blokes where you kind of thought, no, I'm going to stay in shorts and thongs?
Yeah, so Three Blokes is where this studio originated. It literally was three blokes, me and a couple of other guys. And we had a couple of really challenging projects. We'd done work for hire. We scaled up to, I think, 8 people at one point in time. And even our failures were significant enough successes to get noticed by some American publishers. So 3 different publishers flew us to America to investigate us. Once again, the key difference was we were doing quite innovative things here. Enough, because everything's online these days, because we were innovative enough, we got noticed and flown over to America. That led to the RockU acquisition. That also didn't succeed. You could say it failed. But once again, one of the investors in RockU, one of the VCs, was also a venture capitalist heavily invested in KIXEYE and thought we'd be a fantastic fit there. And so I literally walked around the corner in San Francisco and had a meeting with the CEO. And 7 days later, we were part of KIXEYE and the entire team was sitting in the boardroom in America. So because it's such a small world these days, even from the humblest beginnings and from our failures, opportunities popped up. And had we have not had those failures, there's a real chance we would never have had the succession of events that actually led us to now. That 3-minute summary was 2.5 years of our lives. But you know, as I say, I guess the one thing we did have was persistence.
Yeah. And Nicole, I mean, I know your story, and so they both work in this tiny little space. So have you got a bigger room now? Slightly bigger. And the family contributes to the game. I'm really jealous because they live up on the Sunshine Coast, and it's, you know, it looks they're by the beach. But I mean, have you and Jason ever sort of turned around and thought, oh, you know, why did we do this? Why didn't, you know, you're both consummate professionals. You've got fabulous reputations and talents. You could easily have found work and not taken this hard road.
Yeah. Well, as I've mentioned, there's been a lot of sleepless nights where I have thought, what have we done? Why did we do this? But we thought we'd always regret it if we didn't try it, and we can always get proper jobs later if things don't work out. And to be honest, if we didn't live at the beach, I think I would have chucked it all in 18 months ago. Sometimes you just get to a point where it's all too hard and the payoff seems way too far away, and you just need to go and sit and look at the ocean for 5 minutes and get back into it.
What about the good parts though? The real sort of where you just go, oh wow, this is so much what I want to be doing.
It's the best job in the world. you make fun. I mean,
Yeah.
when you give your game to someone and you just see them enjoy it, and it's the best thing they've ever played, or they really connect with the character, or it's just wonderful knowing that you made that experience for them.
Yeah, I know. The great thing about games, of course, is you can take something that's not finished and show people, and you have to really, don't you?
Yeah.
You know, so we were kind of, we were talking earlier upstairs, and I thought one of the more interesting kind of things that was said was Nart's little story about putting in for, was it the Indie Games Fund?
No, that was IGF.
Sorry, the IGF, the Indie Games Festival.
Yes.
Sorry, the IGF still sits in my head. Sorry, Mike, if you're here, it's scarred me.
I like the Interactive Games Fund as much as anybody else. We should bring that back. Can we lobby the government?
That's right, if you're here. But no, so the Indie Games Festival. I thought that was really, really interesting because in a way I thought it kind of pinpointed some of the curious attitudes towards indie game makers, and if you like, a bit of a misunderstanding around what it means to make something of beauty all by yourself. Do you want to tell us that story again?
Is this
I don't know if it'll make
feedback
sense to everybody here.
that we got from the judges?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So it was just an interesting case of perception in the marketplace, I suppose, where we're a small team. Like I said, there's 3 of us, much like Nicole and her family. And our game is very highly visually polished. And so we had entered into the IGF, which is a large independent competition. It's actually one of the things I recommend people look into if you're thinking about making an independent game. Do your research on the competitions and things that are out there. They're the main method of marketing you're going to find if you're not spending big dollars on getting your game on the side of a bus. Where I saw 6 ads for games on the side of a bus on my way here today, so there are people doing that. And we had entered into this competition, and one of the pieces of feedback we got was actually the judges sending us back saying, "Oh, we think this is fantastic. We would have entered it in for an award, but we thought it wasn't in the spirit of the competition, and we're sure lots and lots of people worked really hard on this." The implication being that we were a professional outfit trying to pretend to be independent, which is something that can definitely happen. You have to be aware of the space is so large at the moment with people as small as single-person team going up to George's company, which is 40 people, and then Ubisoft are currently employing somewhere in the realm of 1,500 to 2,000 people to make Assassin's Creed games every year. So you don't really know who's behind a game, and in our case, it was it was very disheartening to get that kind of message. But it's that's the kind of the marketplace the way it is right now is so diverse.
One of those really weird compliments, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a backhanded compliment. Really.
The thing about getting a prize in the Independent Game Festival is it then gives you some kind of income to go to the game exhibitions like GDC and things like that. So it's actually a route. And if we're talking publishing versus indie, Morgan, I've heard you use really quite rude expressions.
About publishers? About
I'm not going
indies?
to kind of commit you to that.
Well, look, I think the ultimate situation we're seeing now has to do with much more open platforms across the board. Much more open platforms, and it's kind of a strange thing too. You particularly sitting in a room with an audience of people who might come from a background more in film. It really doesn't matter what scale you're at. You end up in this situation where in order to do creative work you need to throw a business structure around it. So there's not this, there are very few opportunities for somebody to say, no, I would just like to write or I would just like to direct and I would like somebody else to handle all the stuff. Everybody has to be a producer as well as everything else in all of these indie scales. And that leads to some really interesting scenarios where, last night I was up till 2 a.m. Writing script because we have a voiceover recording session happening today. And then I will start writing marketing materials, and then I'll start doing updates, and then I'll go back to the office and bolt together some desks and assemble a PC. And at some point I might do something that actually looks like real work. And these are all the things you need to do to keep the wheels rolling. that previously, we come from a world where 5 years ago the only model was a publisher model. A publisher would front a bunch of cash to a mid-sized team, somewhere between $3 and $10 million, and they would do PR and they would do marketing and they would go to festivals, and the developers would sit in a box and focus on creating the work. That's almost entirely gone away and been replaced with the model of kind of do it all yourself. And in some cases you can be fortunate, and if Apple likes your game and decides to feature it, then you will get tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of downloads. And that can happen even if you've done nothing, but waiting for that lightning to strike is very tricky. Where I come down against publishers is I think there are a lot of people at the moment trying to take on a middleman role in a market that's rapidly democratizing, and a lot of them don't offer a particularly strong value proposition other than what we'd like to do is sign up a lot of people, offer to distribute their work, pay them no advance, and take 30% of the money on the basis that some will hit, some will miss, and the ones that hit will hopefully make us a profit. I think very few of them offer a great bang for buck, and you can do a lot of this yourself. But by the same token, I know that there are developers who have no desire to do any of this themselves, who want to focus on just making great creative work, and I wish there were better opportunities for them in the current market. That's a tough place to be. It is, however, developing and improving, and I think in the next 5 to 10 years we'll see a lot of that structure arise.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question to offer you all was, we've got people perhaps who are looking at this as an emerging market or a converging market. And, I mean, what we kind of perhaps describe now, do you think that's about to change? What would you say to somebody who's looking at games, thinking about joining in? Is it really going to be the same in the next few years? What's going to change, do you think? You're kind of practically on that flow already, Morgan.
Yeah, look, discovery is the hard thing. So having people see your work after you've made it really is the big challenge right now, and will remain the big challenge because lots of people are doing things. But that's separate to kind of the message I'd send, which is that, tools are awesome these days. Even if you're not a programmer, there's fantastic tools enabling you to put stuff together. So make some stuff, and I'm taking it as a given that if you want to make work in the game space, you are excited by the space and excited by the potential and aware and across what work is out there. If you're not, but you'd like to be across it, then a little bit of research will take you to things like Twine, which are text games that are easily put together by anybody who can write a sentence, all the way through to plugins for Unity that let you do visual stuff. Games like Gone Home that talk about really personal stories about modern contemporary personal stories about space and family and sexuality. There is an enormously broad range of work, whatever story you want to tell, and games is not actually primarily a storytelling medium, but whatever story you want to tell, whatever experience you want to deliver, there's the opportunity to do that. And I think if you can do that with a clear voice, you can break through those issues of discovery and help to find a market for what you're making. Because the market, as represented by the studies earlier, is out there. Everybody plays games. Everybody would like a game for them. If you have a voice and you've got something to say, then you will probably find an ear to hear it. And then connecting those two together is the trick.
I might just bring that round to Nicole, because Nicole, it's actually you're doing some work with children and games, which is sort of, there's a label on this conference somewhere that says children, games and convergence. But you're actually talking about them making games, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
It's just starting, but
yeah. Sorry, that's not on the list. I've thrown that one at you. But how do you deal with them as, say, up and coming makers of these kinds of works?
We've also been working with kids with Asperger's, teaching them how to make games, just very casually. Games is a really great I can't think of the word. It's a great way to express yourself. And there's, like Morgan said, so many tools out there now. No matter what your skill, you can find a way to express yourself using a game. And it connects with so many kids these days. Even if you have no interest in making games to make a living, it's worthwhile looking at just as and teaching kids just as a way to express themselves.
Yeah. It changes things, though, doesn't it? You're going to say something now.
I was just going to say, it's approaching that point we found when handycams became available cheaply to everyone in the world. Everyone was a filmmaker all of a sudden, and but not everyone made films for a living. So that's getting to that point in games now where our tools are getting cheap enough, they're getting accessible enough and understandable enough that you don't need to be technically capable to make a game. Like Morgan was saying, there's Twine, which is a text-based game creation system. And it's really open to everyone, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will be making commercially released games.
So what does that do for, all of you? Because suddenly we're walking into this world where Nicole's teaching your previous markets how to make the games for themselves. That's so naughty. And we've got tools where people like me are saying, this is how you make games, this is what a design is, etc., etc., etc. I mean, how do you see your markets evolving out of that situation? Suddenly people can make games. Who are you then?
Well, and I think something like Minecraft shows the popularity of creative tool sets as well. Minecraft is much less a game than a set of tools for creating things.
Lego.
Exactly. Construction toys have been popular since the dawn of time. I think, it's one part terrifying in that you have an exceptionally educated bunch of game developers coming up who lack all of the kind of preconceptions about the sorts of work that is reasonable to do that we do. But the other is that, in a lot of ways, I think most developers are probably not looking at the 12-year-old kids with Asperger's as their primary audience. I think it's much more true to say that the audiences are expanding and older audiences are very much, the majority of people who are paying for work, which is an important part of the equation for commercial success. So, and there's all of these opportunities coming up and all of these markets opening up. Asia's opened up in a huge way. India and Africa will be huge markets. There are hundreds of thousands of more creative work added every day, and hundreds of thousands of people added to the audience. And like I say, the ultimate key is to connect a voice to somebody who wants to hear it and to find who that is in the market. But I don't think it's scary. I think it's exciting. It's really scary if you want to try and do stuff based off last year's projections. Like if you're a publicly traded company trying to plot out a graph on the basis of what worked last year, you are fucked. Like, just don't do that. Because it changes every 6 months. And as long as we've been running the company, my partner and I sit down at the start of every year and kind of lay out what our predictions are and where we think things are going and how we can best respond to a changing market. And in the last couple of years, we've kind of made projections of it. Well, it's really uncertain right now, but we expect it to solidify and cohere. So we'll deal with the current situation right now and make games for where we think things are at. And then in 12 months' time, hopefully it'll all have fallen out and we'll know what a sensible thing to do is. And that hasn't happened. I don't think that's going to happen again, to be honest. The opportunity is always where the future is moving. Fundamentally, in as much as anything, we're an industry guided by fashion. So there are movements and waves and opportunities that arise and games and styles that are in fashion and people who set the trends. So.
Yeah. Fundamentally made me sort of think in terms of funding, and Nat earlier mentioned the demise of the, Screen Australia support for games, but I'm assuming, we're still interested in some kind of funding. Would you like to kind of perhaps, Nat, you'd like to talk about that?
Well, there's
And
still
where do we look for money now to support those fabulous ideas?
there's less options available for full project funding in Australia now, particularly outside of, I think Victoria still has some. But there are actually a number of opportunities that you can still seek out funding for, mostly to do with marketing and travel. Screen Queensland actually has great systems in place for travel grants that will let you go to overseas or domestic conferences and expos.
They've been very helpful for us, so thank you to Screen Queensland people.
Yeah.
Thank you, Screen Queensland, wherever you are.
Thank you. It's been amazing for us as well. We went to GDC and PAX East this year. And as a result of that, we had, got meetings with different people, and Sony offered to put us up at their booth at E3, where someone from our team is over there right now demoing the game at the world's largest games conference. So it's the kind of opportunities that you can create by attending these expos are incalculable in their benefits. Screen Queensland also have some funding for prototype stages of development. I haven't had any experience with that myself, but I believe it would be very valuable if you're looking at expanding into this area, but you want to kind of test the waters and don't have discretionary funds yourself. And other than that, you're going to have to look at overseas funding, I think, because Screen Australia is no more, as Truna was saying, and that was our main source for full project funding here in Australia.
Yeah, it all depends on how much you need, really. And for the record, to game developers use terminology conveniently in exactly the opposite way to film. So when we say development, we mean production, and when we say prototyping, we mean development, sort of. But there are state level opportunities. There's in New South Wales, Screen New South Wales had a games fund which did close. They still fund games through their film fund. I'm not sure what the situation is going to be with Screen Australia in a post games fund world. There was a fund before that. I don't even know if Screen Australia has come to those decisions yet, but hopefully they can clear that up. But I'm broadly hopeful. There are really good opportunities these days, though, to crowdfund as you go, to pick up opportunities. It depends on what sort of level of funding you require and how big the scope of what you're doing is, and how much reputation you've got to work with, and how long you can go without being paid. You know, this was the critical thing in setting up Defiant, is that we set ourselves up with only wife funding, and that was probably the first 6 months. Dan and I were supported by our wonderful partners. There are international options, but they're tricky to get as well. I think if you have the sort of visibility that would make it possible to easily track international funding, you'd probably have the sort of visibility that would make it relatively easy to do a solid Kickstarter and pull funding behind that. So I can easily imagine projects over the next couple of years that had a funding path along the lines of finding, $10,000 to $20,000 of state level funding in order to put together a prototype, that on the basis of that prototype and materials went to some international shows, showed press and publishers, put together a crowdfunding campaign that then brought in another $30,000 to $100,000 of development funding, which then puts you in a position to release to either mobile platforms or PC platforms in a way that you could pull down more funding. To fund projects at the kind of $1 million and up level is much harder at the moment, but I think it's much harder, across the board. I don't think that's changed dramatically in the last 3 or 4 years. So.
Just a very quick question, while we're on the topic. What would you consider a benchmark figure for developing a game for iOS, Android platform?
Depending on how real the money is you're spending, I would say that somewhere around the $150,000 mark is a credible budget. There are certainly, and I'm really earmarking that on a $10,000 per person per man month cost, because that's a common number in the industry, to cover rent, pay, benefits, computers, software, the whole box and dice. As a rule of thumb, that's probably pretty high for any sort of startup or early stage company, and it's pretty low for a Microsoft or Electronic Arts, but it's okay to work out something on the back of the envelope. So for that, you're saying that's kind of 15 man months. Let's say 3 people, 5 months. 3 people, 5 months is a good crack at an iOS game. You can certainly do it for less, and you can certainly do it for more. Something like Clash of Clans probably cost upwards of 3 mil. But I think if you can make a game, somewhere between $75,000 and $300,000, there's a reasonable chance of getting that money back without having to be an expert in the free-to-play space, which is a whole different ball game, and one I wouldn't recommend people get into unless they know it well. You start to have to deal with the things that George talks about: user acquisition, analytics, services, side work. It's really a completely separate skill set, and you need to have that on board to be in that space, is my belief.
So I think that brings us, I'm not run out of time. Who knows how long we've got left? Another couple of questions, and then audience questions. You're going to wave at us and say you've got 10 minutes left, open to everybody. Do pop in if you kind of have a better question than mine.
I have a question. Sorry, I'm a bit naive with the games and that, and more TV, film. But how does I'm trying to understand how you make money from the free game, the downloadable free games. Like, how does... That seems like there's a lot of money to make the game, so how do they make it?
Yeah, I can certainly take that one. So in our games, they are completely free to play. And if you have lots of time on your hands, you can spend a lot of time grinding your way through the game. So accumulating resources, building up your fleets, going and attacking your neighbours. And just, we have people that are online 24/7 grinding away at the game. However, if you're time poor, then we monetize your impatience. So we can offer you the opportunity to speed up the experience by spending money in the game, by buying gold and speeding the game up. We also monetize revenge. So if you attack me, I'm going to want to attack you back, but do I want to wait for my repairs to happen? Do I want to wait to accumulate resources and build up my fleet? No, I'll just spend money, get a bigger ship and hit you straight back. So those kinds of loops generate money. Now, only a very small proportion of our market spends, round about 5%, but they spend a lot, a real lot.
Me, my kids and me. The Smurfs, you could buy berries.
There you go, exactly. So some of our players can spend up to $15,000 or $20,000 in a game.
Wow, that's real revenge.
So it's a hobby for some people, and they just devote their lives to it.
Someone needs to make a boss's game where you can get your boss back.
I'm sure it will be Japanese. I just want to hand that one to Cole, actually, because I know that you and Jason had conversations about whether Ninja Pizza Girl was going to be free to play.
Biggest fight in our 20-year marriage was how to monetize Ninja Pizza Girl. Jason wanted to go free to play, for the record, but I won. It's going to be a paid app. I think because our market is quite young, 8 and up, it was a little bit risky to go free to play. I think there's going to be a bit of a kickback, and also because I don't think we have the resources to balance it. There's a lot of, George will tell you, there's a lot of work in balancing a game to get your monetization right, and I just think we had enough to do just making the game.
Not grab the mic.
I was just gonna mention with the differences between free to play and paid. It also really depends on what your focus is, not just in terms of the type of content you're making. Being free to play has to be broad. There can be nobody who the game isn't for if it's free to play, because you're aiming at getting 100 million users and then 5% of them will pay you. whereas I'm making a niche game that I need to sell 20,000 copies of, and then I can make another game. And the second difference is the platforms that you're targeting. So my game is on consoles, PS4, Vita, and Wii U. And traditionally, those platforms haven't been friendly to free-to-play because there are more, people call them a core audience for video gamers, people who spend $120 on the latest EA game or $20 on a downloadable game. And they're not the kind of people who play a lot of free-to-play games, and they're not that mass market. So there's a lot more decisions than just how you're going to monetize your game. It goes into what kind of game you have, who the user base is going to be, and what platforms you want it to be on.
I think those platforms are all changing in their acceptance of free to play as well. So that's another thing to take in. But one of the other ways that that money's made, in the case of Ski Safari, which, as I said, there's 50 million plus players, a lot of them in China, where you can't sell a game for $1. You won't move many units. But one of the ways that makes money is advertising. So, you get a free experience, but there's an ad in it. You can pay to make the game go away, or you can collect small amounts of revenue from the ad impressions. Anything at all times 50 million ends up being a reasonable amount of money. So if you've got broad reach, then there are options and opportunities there.
There was a question coming in from over there.
Just curious about the journey you go on from when you conceive of a game. What are the sort of broad steps it goes through before it can then be released to the world to play?
Well, I mean, in my particular case, our owners are our bankers. So for us, typically, we have what we call a skunk works. So we carve off just a very small portion of our development resource to rapidly prototype ideas because documents never convey very much. And then when we get something that's demonstrable, we pitch it. And because we're a very small company, I think total number of employees is 500. By Silicon Valley standards, that's still manageable. Really the CEO and a small group of executives make the decision. And so we can get ideas up and running really efficiently. And all they do is look at their projections for where the markets are likely to be, both from a technology point of view and from a fashion point of view. And because the development cycles now are much, much shorter, 10 years ago we would have to project 3 years ahead because that's how long it took to make a game. And technology and fashions and everything else were very volatile. Now we project just 6 months. And because we follow the lean startup build, measure, learn cycle, we get the minimum viable product on the market, very often under a fictitious name, very often in a test market like New Zealand, just very isolated, and it won't impact the rest of the world. And we'll try something there, and we'll measure how it goes, and we'll base our future investment on that. So it becomes it's obviously still qualitative, but there's also quantitative triggers. Soon as we hit these thresholds, we know we have something viable.
So we don't have a great process. If there's anything there, it's something like a kind of dream, squabble, pain, then fix the bugs and release kind of process. But it's become longer over time. We just talk about ideas we've got all the time. We talk about what the market's doing all the time, and then eventually somebody mentions an idea, and then somebody else kind of repeats it a couple of days later, and it comes up again a couple of days after that, and we realise that we're actually all pretty excited about it. And that's the way things start. And then we'll work on things for a while and build a prototype, and then we'll go, oh, well, that's a silly idea. We shouldn't do that, and we'll leave it on the shelf. We've left a lot of stuff on the shelf. But eventually stuff gets enough traction that we're kind of committed to it, and then it's a bit like, you know, it's that whole ball of tar that you're stuck in that's rolling down the hill at that point in time. And then you have to do all the work, because all the bits that you've kind of pretended are there need to actually be there to make the game. For something like Hand of Fate, we took a demo to PAX last year on about a month's work, and that pretty much sold what the game was going to be, a tiny cross-section of the game, and then it's taken us, you know, 13 months to actually make that game that we pretended we had. So, yeah, that's sort of our process, and now we, you know, get that on the market as quickly as possible, get people involved playing early builds, continue to refine and improve until it's ready to go. Polish is one of the most important things in shipping a good game, and takes the longest.
And I think we're officially, are we out of time?
We're out of time.
All right, I need you to give my beautiful, beautiful colleagues a big hand here.
I think that